Hi guys, welcome to session 35 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. In this session, we will be talking about the optional class, and probably this can be the last feature that we will talk about in Java 8. Yes, there are a couple of more features that we might discuss in Java 8, but for our this series, I think those things will not be applied in future. Fine. So it's about completing the series fast, and other Java 8 features definitely I'll discuss that maybe in some other playlist, not into this particular playlist. And if you are liking this particular playlist, ask your friends to subscribe to this channel so that I can create more such contents, and it encourages me that I have a bigger audience. Fine. So let's go back to the things that we were discussing in the previous session. We talked about the streams, right? So let me just clean up everything that we have discussed with the streams, and let's talk about optional and what exactly is an optional. Why should we use an optional? How do we create optional instances? How it was introduced into Java 8, what advantages it brings to us, right? So let's first write a main method over here. And now let's talk about the concept of an optional class. So this optional class was introduced into Java 8 to avoid null pointer exceptions. So how it avoids null pointer exception, what exactly it is and all that, we will see that in details. Fine. So, but remember that optional class was introduced to avoid null pointer exception. What is optional? Optional is a container object, right? Which may or may not contain non-null values. And what is the use of this optional? Where should I be using the optional? The main purpose, the main use of an optional is with the return type of a method. So we will see how exactly optionals will be used with a return type of a method, what advantage they bring in if we use it as a return type of a method, and then how do we create optional objects, and what are the common operations that can be used with the optional. So as for now, you remember a few points, that is optional, the main purpose is to use it as a return type of a method. Then it may or may not contain non-null values, and it was introduced to avoid null pointer exceptions. So first let's see how do we create an instance of an optional. That means creating optional objects. Okay, so how do we create optional objects? Optional object may or may not contain null value, right? So it might be null, might not be null. That means it might contain the value, it might not contain the value. So let's see how do we create the instances for the same. So the first example that I'm showing you is an optional that contains the value. Okay, so let's say name is equal to create an instance of optional, we use optional.off. Okay, so it can be an ofNullable, or it can just be an off, or it can be empty, depending upon what type of optional we are creating. So in this case, I'm creating an optional of some name, let's say Virat Kohli, right? So I'm creating an optional which contains a value, a non-null value, right? So as I told you, an optional may or may not contain a non-null value, right? And then similarly, what I can do is I can create an empty optional as well. Let's call it as empty name. So to create an empty optional, what we can do is we can simply use another method available into optional class, that is empty. And similarly, we can create a nullable optional object. So that can be done by using an ofNullable method available, and we just need to pass in null there. That indicates that we have created a nullable optional. Fine. So this is how we create optional objects. Three type of optional objects can be created, containing a optional containing a value, optional that is empty, and optional that is nullable, a null optional. Now what we can also do is we can check the optional is present or not, or what should be done if the optional is present. So these things can be done. So let's check whether the optional is present or not, and also we can check if the optional is present, what needs to be done. Okay, such things can also be done. So let's check the present. So two things are there. If a present, that is let's say optional dot if present is there, so you can see that optional dot if present takes a consumer. That means a lambda expression can be passed in here. So let's say that is name, and then if it is present, what needs to be done, right? So what needs to be done, just print me that. whatever is present, just print me that. So let's save it and check what is there. So optional contains Virat Kohli, so it should print me Virat Kohli. That looks good. If an optional is present, what needs to be done? Fine. We can also check whether the optional is present or not. If it is present, then what needs to be done, right? Similarly, what we can do is we can check if it is present by just using what name dot is present. So this returns us a boolean value, whether it returns either true or it returns false. If it returns true, that means the optional is present. If it returns false, that means that the optional is not present. Fine. So generally what we do is, if optional is present, we perform a get. Now what is that get method? Get method is to get the optional value. So what is that? Let's understand that. So we can generally say if optional, that is name dot is present, sorry, not is empty. If it is present, what needs to be done? So if the optional is present, then what I want is, I just want to print that optional. So name dot get. See, name is an optional. Name dot get is the value that we are getting here. Okay. So that means if I do something like name dot to upper, at that time I'll not be able to convert it into an uppercase. That's because name is an optional object. You can see that it is of type optional of string. So if I want this string value out of this optional, then what I have to do is I have to perform a get method out of this. So if I do a get, at that time it is getting the value of that optional, and now I can do a to uppercase. Okay, so do remember this part. If the optional is present, we are getting the name, and then it converts that into uppercase and then gives it to me. If it is not present, then in that case we can do something, an optional is empty or optional is null or something. So that can be done in an else case. Fine. So similar thing, what I will do is I'll check it with an empty optional and then try and perform a empty check. So instead of name, if I see an empty name, so I can do that empty name dot is present. If it is present, then I am performing an uppercase, or else what I can simply do is system.out.println. I'll say name is not present or name is empty or something I can do. Fine. So run this. So you can see that name is not present, which is empty, right? So I'm checking it with the empty name. So here we created an empty object, right? Empty optional object. So this way we can really test whether the optional is present or not. What can be done if the optional is not present? So if present, here we can directly do that, right? If present, then what needs to be done, right? And similarly, what we can also do is we can say orElseGet. So there are two more methods that are available with the optional that can be used when the optional is not present. Fine. So let's go ahead and understand what can be done with these two methods, like orElse is one optional method that can be used, and there is one more that is called as orElseGet. So once again, you can go to Java doc and look out for the methods that are available into optional, like we used to do it with every single new class that we are discussing, right? So if you are unaware about the methods that are available into an optional class, then what you can simply do is you can go for the Oracle documentation and then see the methods, the constructors available for the class optional. Fine. So now what I'm going to do is I will try and use these two methods, that is optional dot or else and optional dot get. Fine. So I'll use a string. Let's say before using a string, now I will take an empty name, the same empty name which is not present, right? The optional is not present here. So if the optional is not present, what I'm gonna do? I am saying or else do something, right? So or else what? If the optional is not present, say that uh, something, maybe like if the name is not present, then I want to give a default name. If suppose there is a city optional of some city name, if the city name is missing, if it is empty, then I want to give a default city as Bangalore. So that way I can make use of an or else. Okay, so let's say if an optional is not present, what needs to be done? Let's say there's something like default name should be given here. Fine. So what can be done in that case? So I can just say string default name is equal to, so if an optional is not present, the default name will be given to the optional, and then that default name can be taken like this. Fine. So let's just say system.out.println, and now I'll say what's the default name, what it contains. So let's save it and get this. So what do I get? I get the default name because an optional is not present, right? So the value is not present. What if the value is present? Can this give me the default name, or it's not gonna give me the default name, right? So let us test that as well. So now what I will do is default name 1 I will check. Now instead of checking it with an empty name, I'll check it with the name or else default name, and then I will go with the default name 1. Okay, let's save it and run this piece of code and see the last result. The last result is not default name again, right? So the last result is Virat Kohli. That is because now this name is present, whereas empty name was not present. So this or else only gives this default value if the value is not present. If the value is present, then it's gonna return you the value itself. Hope this is clear how an or else can be used, right? So if the value is present, then it gives you the value. If the value is not present, at that time, it is going to give you the default name, whatever you have given. Fine. So let's now also check what this or else get does. Okay. So now once again, I'll just differentiate this like this. So I'm putting up everything into one single demo itself. How do we create an optional object? How do we check the is present, if present, is present, or else get, and all that. Okay, so I'm putting up everything into one, and after that we will actually compare the two programs where I use an optional object and I don't use an optional object, and then we will understand what happens if we do not use an optional object and what happens if we use an optional object, so that we can appreciate the use of the optional. Okay, so one more nullable optional is something that I created here, right? So let's say nullable object, which is nullable name in our case. So nullable name dot, now I'm using or else get. Okay, so you can see that if a value is present, returns the value, otherwise returns the result produced by the supplying function. So here itself you can get to know the description about what exactly it does. Whereas or else, you can see what or else does. If a value is present, returns the value, otherwise returns other. So whatever you have given, it returns that. In or else get, it returns the value that is provided by the supplying function. So what is that and how do we do it, right? So obviously or else get supplying function, in the sense it's a lambda expression, right? So here what I can do is I can simply say a lambda expression here, and then whatever is the value that is being generated here can be given. So it can be a function returning some value or anything. Fine. Or else get. So in this or else get, what I will do is I will simply say uh, returned name. So a function might return the name that can completely be passed over here. So I'll just call it as a returned name here, and let's call this as what, string result or something, or return the name is equal to, since optional is not present, obviously it has to give me the returned name. So let's just print it, system.out.println returned name. So save it and let's understand what it gives. So return name is being returned here in a lambda expression, so that's what it is giving us. So the simple difference between or else and or else get is that or else directly gives you the value, whereas or else get can give you the function, whatever lambda expression is returning you, that can be returned as a value if the optional is not present. If an optional is present, then like where did I check the optional stuff there? Or else get with name, right? Yeah, here. Or else he, instead of getting this default name or else, I was just getting this value. Even if I use it with or else get, in that case also a name will be returned if it contains the value. If it does not contain value, then only it is going to give you these results. Fine. So Filters can be applied with the optional, that is also possible. First, let me just put this into the repository. So this is our session 34. So obviously it should be date 34 for us. So we have created 34 already, right? So this must be session 35 for us, right? Yes, session 35. So let's create a day 35 repository for this. Day 35 slash demo 1 optional. So these are commonly used operations with optional, like creating optional objects, getting the optional object, checking whether the optional is present or not. If not present, then using orElse or orElseGet for an optional to provide in the value, or directly a value or else a returned value. Fine. So now can we use stream operations on optional, like we used filters, we use what map and all that? So is it possible to use that? Yes, it is definitely possible to use that also. Fine. So let me just put a comment and go down and then use filter on this. Okay. So once again, what I will do is I will say the name, which I have already. Virat Kohli is there, right? So name dot filter. So I want to filter what? If the name begins with V, do something, and if not, do something else, right? So that's what I want to do, just kind of a filter I want to apply on this. Fine. So filter, we know that it takes a lambda expression or a method reference. So let's say name n dot maybe starts with what? Starts with V. If it starts with V, do something, right? So we'll say we'll check if the filter is applied or not, right? So optional of string is what it returns, and let's say it is a filtered name equals to. Fine. So then we will check if the filter name is available or not. If the filter name is available, that means if it starts with V, it will be available. If it does not start with V, then it will be empty, right? So let's check now whether the filtered name is available or not. To check whether the optional is present or not, we know that we use an isPresent or ifPresent, right? So if you remember this, we either use a isPresent or we use a ifPresent. So I'll go ahead and check if it is present or not. So what is present or not? The filtered name is present or not. So I'm applying a filter and checking whether whether this name starts with V or not. If it starts with V, then return the optional with that particular value, else do not return it, right? So instead of like name dot if present, we will say filtered name dot if present. So if the filtered name is present, then print that, right? So let's save it and then run it and understand it. So you can see that filtered name, yes, it starts with V, so the value is present. If it does not start with, like say I have the name is Virat Kohli, now what I'm checking is whether it starts with Z or what. If it does start with Z, it is going to return you that name, else it is not going to give you that, right? Because the optional here in this case is empty, so you're not getting any result. If you use an or else instead of if present, then you would get that particular value, right? So save it. Let's go back. Now filtering can be applied. We can also apply maps on this, right? Which is like what? We can convert that into uppercase. I have already done that in here, right? Is present here, right? So likewise, what I can simply do is I can apply a map and do it on one line itself. So let's see how can we do that. The map, and I have a name, right? So like I used a name dot filter, I can use a name dot map as well. Name dot map. So then again a function, whatever I want to do. So what I want to do is I want to convert this particular name into uppercase. So an uppercase of string has to be applied on this. So I'll just say string class and then the uppercase method, right? So which is two uppercase. So this is what I want to apply, and then whatever is returned, I will store that. So it returns an optional of type string, and let's say upper name. If it is present, it will convert that particular thing into an uppercase. If not, then it will not print it. So similarly, what I'm gonna do is once again I'll check if it is present, then print it out, else uh, not, right? So instead of filtered name, let's call it as upper name. Upper name, if it is present, just print that particular name. Let's save it. Now that a name contains Virat Kohli, so that will be converted into uppercase. So you can see that it is converted into uppercase. So we can also make use of what? Or else, we have used or else, right? So we can use an or else throw. We can raise an exception. So by using an or else throw. So let's see how can we do that. So this is or else throw. So this is what we can do. And let's say name dot or else throw. Like or else get, it was retrieving the value, right? Uh, or else throw will throw an exception if the optional is empty. Fine. So now or else throw, what we are throwing, what should be thrown? Or else throw new any exception you want to throw. Maybe you want to throw a null pointer exception here, or a any runtime exception, arithmetic exception, anything you want to throw. Maybe in this case I'm throwing a null pointer exception, and I will say name is missing or something. Fine. So which is what I wanted to throw. So let's see. So I'm throwing a new null pointer exception in case if the name is not present, right? So what I will do now is I'll once again store this into something string uh, name. Let's call it as uh, having name is equal to, fine, and I will just say system.out.println the having name. So now this particular name optional contains Virat Kohli, so it should actually give me that particular value. So it is giving me the value is retrieved. If the name is empty, what happens? So let's check that. By doing what? By doing the same thing with an empty optional or a nullable optional. Having name 1, and instead of name, let's use an empty optional, empty name, or else throw having name 1, right? So we are printing that. In this case, it should throw us a null pointer exception. So a null pointer exception says name is missing. So that way we can even throw exceptions if optionals are empty or optionals are not present. So hopefully you have got to know the very basic operations about the optional, that is or else throw, what or else throw does, and mapping an optional, filtering an optional object, then getting the optional object if it is present, or else if it is not present, what needs to be done, right? So this or else get takes a function and returns whatever that particular function returns something, and the directly saying if the value is present, do something, or else do something, right? Or else, and then checking whether the optional values are present or not by using an is present or if present, and then creating optional objects. So hopefully this is clear to you. So let me put this into the repository. Let's call it as demo2 optional operations. Optional common operations. Common operations are like creating an optional, getting the optional object by using a get method, and checking whether the optional is empty or not by using an isEmpty method. And also what we can do is we can do an or else get, or else throw, or else with the optional. We can make use of maps, we can make use of filters. A real-time example like what we have been doing in the previous examples and all, what we can simply do is we can check, we can find a player based on the jersey number, and if the player is not present in our collection at that time, we can return an empty optional. Fine. So we will see that definitely in the later examples. Now what we will do is we will look for an optional demo where we can appreciate the concept, the use of optional. So let's understand that. So what I will do is I'll clean up everything. So we already know the very basic operations that can be done with an optional: creating an optional, checking if the optional is present or not, performing a or else, and using isEmpty, isPresent methods, get method with the optional. So let's now understand the very basic features, basic functionality of optional. So if you remember, I created a player class with the properties and everything, right? So multiple properties I have created. Now what I want is I want similar class. So in this case, what I'll do is, since I have already created a player class, I'll create a class. Let's call it as employee. Definitely I'll go back to my player example because that's where I told you jersey number and all that stuff, right? So I have an employee class, and in this employee class, I'll create one property that is private string name of the employee, right? So obviously now this name of the employee, the common things we will include, that is the constructor that takes that initializes this name. So let's create a constructor with argument, constructor using field. I'll also generate the getters and setters. So as for now, I just want a getter for this. So I'll just be creating a getter for this. Generate getters and setters. So for name I want, and I want only a get name. So I can just uncheck this. It is also possible to just only get either the getter or the setter. Fine. So I have a simple employee class. I think I already have this employee class. So let's call this class as customer class. So I have a customer class, and the constructor should also be customer, right? So I have this customer class, the name of the customer is there, and I can set that name by using a constructor or by, and retrieve the name by using a get method. Fine. So I want now a class which is without optional, right? So in this case, without optional. So what will I be doing in this particular class, right? So what should I do if suppose the customer is null? So what happens in that case? Let's create that customer. I'll say customer equals to null. So I have a null objects here, right? So, and now what I would like to do is this obviously can throw a null pointer exception. So I have to perform a if check here, right? So if customer not equal to null. So what needs to be done in that case? If it is not equal to null, then I can say system.out.println customer dot get name. Uh, in an else case, if it is null, then I can say system.out.println customer not found. Okay, something like this can be done, right? So if a customer object is null, this is possible, right? Here I am writing it directly. It might be a case where I want to get the customer based on the provided name. So the name of a customer can be there, cannot be there. I want to get a customer based on the provided ID. So if an ID is provided, customer might return a null value, right? A class function might return a null value. So if it returns null, it might return null. So what we have to do is we have to always do a null check, right? So in this case, this is pretty simple and straightforward. So since the customer is null here, it says customer not found. So that should be the result of my program. But my focus is not on this result. My focus is that the design of this particular class that I have created, I can create one more function called as get customer. It might return a customer object to us, right? So if we are not using an optional, then we have to explicitly perform this null check everywhere, right? Similarly, we will use the same example with an optional, how it would look like when we use an optional, right? Same example itself. So let's call this as a problem statement first. So demo 3, problem statement. Now, what is the problem in this, right? The problem here is that we have to manually perform a null check. That's one problem. Then the risk of this, if we forget to manually check the null, it is possible, right? So our application might crash because we get a null pointer exception. The moment we get an exception, the program gets terminated, right? So there is no safety here. There is a risk of getting our program being terminated. So what I will do is I will now use a similar example, the same set of example with an optional. Okay, so let's see how do we use it with an optional. Same example. So this was without an optional. So if I'm doing the same thing with optional, so in this case again I have to provide what? I have to provide a uh, null reference itself, right? So I'll use an optional. We already know that how do we create instances of optional. So here I'm gonna say optional dot an empty optional object. Fine. So this will actually give us an empty optional object, right? And this returns us an optional of customer. Instead of directly getting a customer instance, it returns us a optional customer. So the moment I say it is an optional customer, whenever you see optional, you should think that optional might be present, might not be present, because it's a container that may or may not contain null value, right? So what we do now is present and then get, right? Or else what we can do is if present or else. So this if present or else was actually introduced into Java 9. Okay, if you are just using Java 8 feature, at that time you can use a is present and then perform a get. So what I can do is if customer dot is present, then I will do a customer dot get name. I have to do dot get. So this gives me the customer object dot get name. I can do fine. If it is present, then I can do that. And if not, I can simply say customer not found. So let's save it. So since the customer object is empty, so in this case I should get customer not found. So this is how we can perform a check. Now yeah, if it is Java 9 that you are using, in my case I installed what, Java 20, right? So I can use an if present also. If present, what needs to be done, or else what needs to be done. Fine. Or we can also provide a default value by using an or else, right? So everything that we have used before can be done here. Everything like an or else can be used, or anything you can provide it that way. So let me give you an example for the same. So what we did there, we used a customer, right? So a customer optional we have. So we can say customer optional, we will check and map this particular customer object with the get name of customer. Fine. Dot map, and we will map it to what, the customer class dot get name. So we perform a method reference here. Sorry, not get name, method reference is this, right? So we'll do it with the get name. And in that case, if that happens, then what we can do is, if it is present, then it is fine. Give the name, or else what you do is, or else you give some maybe a default customer object. So some customer object can be passed in there, and we can get what, string name is equal to. So this should be our, yeah, customer name or anything. So system.out.println name. So if the, now that the optional object is empty, so we should get this default customer name, right? So we are getting the default customer name since the optional is empty now. If the customer was present, it would give us the customer name. Like for example, if it is an optional customer, then if I have something like optional dot of new customer, and then I will provide in some name, maybe Virat in this case. So save. So now you'll notice that since the optional is not empty, it is giving me Virat. So if the optional is empty, at that time it is going to give us the empty result or else stuff. So here 2 lines of code. So it can be an optional dot of empty An empty optional can be given or an optional customer can be given. So here you will also understand how do you provide an optional customer. Like in previous examples, it was only optional strings. Here it is an optional customer. So what would be the advantage of this? The advantage is that you are not checking a null directly, right? Your optional is handling that. And also it makes it clear to the caller of the method that the value might be absent. Now in this case I still have not used a return type as an optional. I'm directly using an optional object, but the main purpose of an optional is to prevent null pointer exception, and it is provided as a return type for the same. Fine. So what can be done now? So let's see this in real time itself. Like how can we have a method that has a return type as an optional, and then uh, a normal return type. Okay, so let's check that. So let me simplify it more. So let me copy that first. Let's call it as demo 4 custom optional customer. All right, so let me just clean up everything that I have done here. Fine. And also what we will do is in the same class itself we will have a get name function, and that actually returns us just the name. So let's not have the customer and everything separately. So this was a better example which was more complicated. So if you want me to make it more simpler and then use an optional or without optional, let's do that. So here what I will do is I'll create one simple function, call it as static string get name. Okay, so and I'll say this method returns a null. It may or may not return null, right? So when I say it returns a string, it might return a null or it might return a string, right? Anything can be returned. So now when you're calling this particular method, what do you generally do? You do things like this: string name is equal to get name. So this is what you generally do. And there is a possibility that it might return a null value. So we have to check that it returns a null value or not. So we might even forget to check whether it returns a null value or not. So we might write something like this: system.out.println. We might say name dot to uppercase. So we can convert this. So when I'm converting this, I'm bound to get a null pointer exception, right? So there is a possibility that I might get a null pointer exception in this case because I have forgotten to check the null. So this might return null. Have to check null, right? We have to check that. So I will put this as one problem statement without using optional, right? So this is my demo 5 problem. So let's call it as problem. And in the next example, let's see the solution for that. So you can now notice that I'm creating a function with a string type of return type. Now the same function I want to use, but instead of giving the function a string type of return type, I would like to give it as optional string. So as I told you, optionals were mainly introduced to provide in the return type of a method, right? So when we have a return type of a method as optional, so first of all, we cannot directly do that, right? So it's not a string that it is returning. It is returning me an optional of string, right? So suppose that this is developed by some other developer and this is what you are developing. So at that time, the other developer is already notifying you that it returns an optional. That means it might return a null value. So when it returns a null value, the caller, you here, you get to know that you have to perform a null check. Not like in the previous example you may or may not perform a null check, but here you have to check whether the optional is empty or not, because optional, if a method has an optional return type, it indicates that it might return a null value. Fine. So whenever your method might return a null value, at that time you have to always use an optional so that you notify the caller that this method, you have to check. It might return a null, so you have to check that null. So this is where the optional actually comes into picture. So the moment I see a get name and it returns an optional, so what I'm going to do in this case, right? So I will definitely, as a programmer, optional, it is optional. So what can be done is that here, instead of returning a null directly, so an optional dot empty should be returned, right? So if an empty optional is returned, that means that the optional is not found. That means it is null, right? Now, the caller, what they will do is they will definitely take it in an optional string. So they'll say optional string. The name is optional, right? Now they will do a get name for this. And after that, what they generally do is they check whether the optional is present or not, right? So they will say if name.isPresent, then you do a system.out.println name.get dot to uppercase, right? So name.get to uppercase if it is present. If not, then obviously it will not be converted into an uppercase, not like in the previous example. So previous example also had a null and I was getting a null pointer exception. Now if I run this, I'll not get a null pointer exception. It is empty, so I have not written anything. If not, like in an else case, I have not written anything, then it is not giving me anything. In this case, I might say name is empty, right? They'll get that. So first of all, the main reason is, the main thing what is happening in this example and the previous example is that previous example, I may or may not handle the null checks, right? In this case, I'm unaware. See, it returns a string. That means it returns something. It might return a null also, right? But as a caller to this get name method, I don't know it might return a null value or not, right? So consider that I'm a caller. Consider this method is given by somebody else and I'm calling that method. Like to uppercase is given by Java developers and we are calling that to uppercase method. So similarly, in a software program, this method is given by somebody else and I'm calling that method. So even if the method does not return a null value, still I have to always perform a null check, right? Suppose if this entire method that is being created, suppose it is created in some class, let's say uh, a new class, let's create a new class, and this is created by somebody else. Let's say this class is what, maybe it's a food item or something, or maybe a customer or something. So let's create a customer class and consider that this customer is actually having this function called as getName, and I'm trying to use that getName from the customer class like this. Fine. So I'll say customer C is equal to new customer, and then I'm performing a C.getName. So if it is a C.getName, now this is created by somebody else, completely a different developer is creating this customer class. So just consider that there are two different developers. One developer is creating this customer class, another developer is utilizing that customer class and get name. So if this customer, he does not provide us an optional, if he does something like this. So since both the methods are static, I don't need to create an object for this. I can simply say what, customer.getName. This is possible, right? So if he is creating it like this, there is a possibility, right? String get name. Let's call it as no optional, and it returns null. So in both the cases, you see that both are returning null only. Both does not contain the value. But in the first case, I am doing a get name and I understand that it is an optional, so I will always use an isPresent. And if I'm just simply utilizing the customer dot get name, customer dot get name no optional. So when I see no optional, I think that it is going to return me a string value. String value is equal to, I will directly do a value dot to uppercase, right? So this might happen. And if this happens, then what? I'm gonna get a null pointer exception, right? But in the above case, it is not possible to get a null pointer exception. That is because the moment somebody is returning me an optional, it means that somebody is informing me that there is a possibility that this particular method might return a null value. So hopefully you have understood the main difference between writing an optional and not writing an optional. Hopefully that's completely clear to you, and also how do we check isPresent and how do we perform a get and all that. So I think the video is getting longer. In the next video I will show you the real-time use of using this optional, where I will create a player again, and I will create a method called as get jersey number, and I will give a get jersey number uh, an optional object, because sometimes the player might not be found. So if the player is not found, at that time I'll give a uh, optional object, and I will also create the same method without an optional object, so that you understand and appreciate the use of optional with the return types of the method. So see you in the next session. If you like this series, please subscribe to this channel and encourage me to create more such videos. And if there is any doubt in these videos, you can always comment and reach out to me on LinkedIn. See you in the next video.